Okay, very good afternoon to you all. Ladies and gentlemen, we're just shutting the door at the back, and thank you for your patience in waiting a few more minutes while we gathered more people and interested persons entered the room. Firstly, I must congratulate you all as we come to the end session, I believe, the last ones of the whole week. And I'm really thankful to all of you for continuing your interest. And perhaps I shouldn't say last but not least, we have one of the most important topics, which is really vital for many of us in our daily lives, which is about healthy diets and sustainable food systems. So this session will really look into the key strategies and challenges for fostering healthy diets, with particular focus on India. And the aim is to really convene a diverse range of panelists, and we're really pleased today to have a tremendous range of expertise in the room, all the way from academia to industry leaders, government officials, and importantly from UN agency as well. The aim is to really talk about various aspects of food security in the context of nutrition. I'm Yasmin Siddiqui, and I'm the director from ADB for Agriculture, Food, Nature and Rural Development, and I cover Central West Asia region, which are the countries from Pakistan all the way to Georgia, and then this way from India all the way to Bhutan. So a vast region, much of which is very heavily impacted by nutrition challenges. I'm pleased today to have, in terms of the session lineup, we're going to have two presentations. One by Mr. Pavan Agarwal, and I'll introduce him properly in a moment, followed by a presentation by Dr. Iram Rao. We'll then have our panelists, Mr. Shigeyuki Takeuchi, Ms. Xiaowei Li, and also Ms. Sherry Attilano, and I believe that's it. Yes, we had one more, but I believe maybe he's not here. I cannot see him. Okay. Thank you. Kazuko is nodding there. So let me first start off with our first very illustrious and privileged to have him in the session today, Mr. Pavan Agarwal, who will be joining us virtually. Mr. Agarwal is the founder and CEO of Food Future Foundation India. This is a non-profit organization that works to build a food literate society and supports dietary shifts to safe, nutritious, and sustainable foods. He has decades of experience as a senior administrator and from the Indian Administrative Services, where he retired as secretary to the Government of India. He's also a senior advisor to the International Fund for Agricultural Development, and also working as a passionate advocate of technology and collaboration on key drivers of impacts. So, Mr. Agarwal, are you online? Are you able to hear us? We'll just wait a moment while the team works on that technical connection. Mr. Agarwal, if you do hear us, please say hello. I think we can. Mr. Agarwal, I can see you. Can you hear us? Mr.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. It's great to hear you.
Okay.
Welcome.
Yeah,
so
right.
nice
Yeah,
to see you. I'm sorry about the technical hitch. But maybe.
Not an issue at all.
Okay, I hope you heard me introduce you to our audience, and I wish you could see the audience. We have a very.
I did.
Okay, excellent.
I did.
So
thank you, Yasmin.
I will let you go ahead now with your presentation, and I might just interrupt a few minutes before, just to let you know you have 2 minutes remaining.
All right. Thank you, Yasmin.
You're welcome. Please go ahead.
So, I hope the control can move my slides as I move forward.
I can give it a try. I will try. Please start, and I'll try.
All right. Okay. So, so first, let me thank Yasmin and ADB for giving me this opportunity to join this forum. I'm so sorry that I'm not able to attend it in person, but my colleague, Dr. Iram Rao, is there. I'm sure that she will more than compensate for my absence. Uh, as Yasmin pointed out that over the last 8, 10 years, I have been dealing with the subject of food and nutrition in the government of India and later through this non-profit organization. And I have seen how the definition of food security has evolved with time. First, it was about access and affordability. Then came in the issue of nutritional security, and eventually today we are talking of sustainability, climate change, and even equitable livelihoods as a part of food security framework for nations and at the local level. So this is how things have evolved with passage of time. And ever since the UN Food System Summit 2021, there has been a focus on what we are calling as food systems approach to looking at issues and challenges of food supply and its consumption, production, and everything else. Uh, uh, this newfound vocabulary around food systems, uh, I have been personally associated as a part of the UN Food System Summit, and later as CEO of the Food Future Foundation, which is working towards transforming food systems in India and leading a coalition of food system transformation in India. We are very closely attached there. Coming to this slide, it may look a little crowded, but I'm not expecting you to go through all of it. But just to give you a sense that food system challenges are many and varied, right from poor diets and malnutrition to freshwater crisis to from biodiversity loss to antimicrobial resistance, food waste to climate change crisis, and then issues of equitable livelihoods. And while all these issues have been there all along, but they often were not looked at from the agri-food perspective many a times. And what is new is that there is globally, uh, a consensus that all these issues need to be looked at in a systemic framework, and that is what is called as the food systems. And we in India, through this Food Future Foundation, started creating a narrative around food systems. How do we define food systems so that we can reach out to the common man, to all the people who are connected with our food systems and make a better sense out of it? We sliced our food systems in seven specific areas. And these seven specific areas, next slide, please. These seven specific areas, we put them together in the form of this beautiful butterfly that you can see on your screen. Each piece, is a 10-gram puzzle piece. And as you can see that the shape, color, and size of these pieces vary. The challenges also vary. Just for the sake of simplicity, we basically looked at it from the seven angles, and that is what I'm going to share with you, that what is this overall framework of a 10-gram butterfly food system puzzle. Next, please. First is diet and consumption. The challenge about malnutrition, which persists in all forms despite huge investments that the government makes in India and maybe across the world on agri-food subsidies and supporting agriculture production and also consumers indirectly. But challenges continue to persist, and new challenges are emerging in this particular area. And the new challenge that is emerging is about popularity of processed and ultra processed food. And with the growth of the food processing sector across the world, which in some ways is good because it takes care of production losses during processing of food and consumption of food, but also during logistics. But there are many issues that arise out of popularity or increasing popularity and addictiveness of these processed food. And possible action pathways, what can possibly be done to address these issues, is a very comprehensive food and nutrition education. Apart from, how can we realign public subsidies and government support to uh, for healthy diets in the country. Next is, next please, agroecology and smallholder farmers, and here, the conventional farming systems that have given us sufficient food, India today, which suffered from food shortages in 60s and 70s, we have surpluses of food, and despite that, the new challenges are emerging, and new challenges, relate to, soil health, water crisis, overuse of pesticides, and crop protection uh, measures in conventional agriculture, and therefore there is now thinking about how can we shift to agroecology based farming systems, which also safeguards the livelihoods of small farmers. So this particular action lab is not only about nature but also about livelihoods of smallholder farmers, and the action pathways are quite clear but not so easy to implement because of other challenges that relate to popularization and universalization of agroecological practices which relate to production and productivity. Next slide, please. Food businesses. The food businesses, the key challenge here is that food businesses will obviously produce what consumers want, and consumers, give premium to taste and convenience rather than nutrition and sustainability, and that is where the key challenge lies. And how do we address this key challenge? I think businesses will have to start looking at new products that they can bring to the market that combine taste, convenience, and health together, and also perhaps look at the issues of sustainability. There could be trust based certifications and third party validations of their food products. There has to be more responsible marketing of unhealthy foods, and so on and so forth. So they are, I'm just through these slides giving you a sense of the challenges and possible action pathways, and then come to the conclusion that all this is quite complex, but not impossible to address if we all work together. Next, please. Food loss and food waste, which is a key concern, and everyone is aware that one third of our food is getting wasted, during production and transportation, but also at the consumer end. And here are the three issues of food losses, food waste that happens at the consumer end, and also upscaling of food, or what is referred to as food valorization, are three specific areas of action where a lot of possibilities and opportunities are there to address the issue of food loss and food waste, and making it, reducing it to half as the SDG 12.3 goal suggests. Next, please. Food environments. I think this is something that is not really very well understood, perhaps across the world, but also in India, that the food environments where, the producers, the retailers bring food to the consumers are very, very important. And unless in the retail environment, in public places, the options for healthier options for food are available, consumers are very unlikely to choose healthy food. Of course, the technology platforms, the e-commerce platforms that have become quite popular in India, particularly in urban areas, are changing the whole thinking around food environments. But obviously, there are actions that can be taken by the city administration, by the local micro food environments to ensure that public places have, healthier options available for citizens, for consumers. But this we thought is an important area of activity and action. Next, please. The sixth area is the policy and institutions. The institutions that have been designed so far, they have taken a siloed approach to addressing the issues of food, nutrition, and agriculture. Now, how do we create new institutions, new thinking around, uh, so that these issues are addressed in a more holistic manner through a joint uh, thinking around addressing these issues? Of course, there are also challenges that the research and data that is available, maybe a lot of good data is available at aggregate level, but unless that data is available at disaggregated level, and that data can suggest specific actions emerging out of it, those are not very useful. Therefore, policy and institutions remains a very key area of focus to drive public policy, but also public action and private sector action in this particular area of food system change. The seventh, next please. The seventh area is food system leadership. This perhaps is most important because as new professionals are being developed by our academic systems, they continue to look at food and nutrition, agriculture in silos. The academic programs are organized according to that. So are the professionals who are working in these areas, and the senior leadership that is working there. So unless we bring about a large scale leadership change, leadership rethinking around food systems, the action is very unlikely to happen. And therefore, these are the seven areas that the coalition of food system transformation is currently focused on. Next, please. In addition to that, we have identified three cross-cutting areas. The gender issues, how do we take care of the issues relating to women, which play a very important role in food systems, empowerment of indigenous and marginalized groups. As these groups, which have sustainable food systems by themselves, get integrated into mainstream, how do we ensure that those practices which are sustainable, continue to be practiced by them? And finally, innovation and digital transformation, which offers new opportunities for action across the food systems. Next, please. Overall, the key message is that food system change requires lots of stakeholders coming together and working together. Consumers, a behavioral shift towards healthy and sustainable diets, who are perhaps starting young and starting with a comprehensive food and nutrition education in schools. Farmers and producers incentivized and supported to produce healthy and sustainable diets. Private sector, you know, give them market incentives to demand for healthy and sustainable foods, regulatory and market competition, and maybe investors, can put pressure on the private sector and businesses so that they bring healthy and sustainable food to to the market. Governments, they need to look at the public subsidies, look at policies that joint up policies. They do not look at only issues of agriculture or nutrition in silos, but look at the whole thing in together. And finally, the academic research institutions, civil society organizations that play an important role, and coalitions like the Food Future Foundation is currently leading, are very important for alignment and coordination across multiple stakeholders. Next, please. These are some of the photographs of the work that we have done in the recent past to bring together, stakeholders and partners across the board to think about food system change and design and take action around them. Next, please. So these are some additional photographs of the activities that we have done. But what I want to sum up is that these food system challenges appear to be complex, but unless we develop a simple narrative around it, and through this coalition, we have tried to create a simple and powerful narrative for change, the change is unlikely to happen. Action is required across multiple stakeholders. And as you can see, that many of those action labs or many of the action labs work across stakeholders. Similarly, stakeholders work across different stakeholders. So how do we bring about joint thinking and joint action is the key to change food systems in India and globally. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Agarwal. You really comprehensively presented with some great slides, which have really laid out some of those key points. And I think your last message about joining hands for thinking and actions is extremely important. I'm most impressed that you were so spot on with your time. So thank you for that too. Next, I'd like to take the opportunity. Sorry, just before I go there, Mr. Agarwal, please do stay on the line because I'm sure there may be questions from our audience for you. So we don't want to lose you just now. Next, I'd like to invite Dr. Iram Rao. Dr. Rao is a professor of food technology at Bhaskaracharya College of Applied Sciences at the University of Delhi. She has more than 29 years of teaching and research experience, and I think I found this part most exciting and interesting. You're a member of the scientific panel on sweets and confectionery, impaneled expert at Food Safety and Standards Authority of India for content development, training and capacity building initiative, and you've been the advisor and technical expert with the World Bank on their reduction of trans fat and sodium in foods in India. This is really interesting. So, Dr. Iram, please do come to the podium and present for us. Thank you.
So, good afternoon, and thank you so much, Ms. Yasmin, ADB, for having me over here. And now I would take this forward on, I think Mr. Agarwal have set the stage for all of us, and we know the importance of healthy diets, which are also sustainable, and the importance of food environment. So I think this is already stated very well, that we have this standard healthy eating plate, which has been put forward by the Eat Lancet Commission, which is clearly pointing out that half the plate should be full of fruits and vegetables. And the remaining half is then divided into one-third, which takes care of your carbohydrates, proteins, and of course, some of the energy-rich sources. So we have seen this, and there is immense scientific evidence which is linking diets with human health and food environment. And why are we talking about sustainable diets? The big question is that there is no doubt about that it is very protective and respectful of biodiversity, ecosystems. It's culturally acceptable. It is accessible, economically fair, also affordable, and it is nutritionally adequate, safe, healthy, and it doesn't compromise on the ecosystem in a certain way. If you look at this is a typical Indian thali, and what we find over here is that if I compare this with my first standard plate, it is a little imbalanced in the sense that the food on this particular plate is carbohydrate dense, it's energy dense, it is typically low in proteins, and it is certainly very low in micronutrients, and that is why India is struggling with the triple burden of malnutrition. So our challenge is to make this healthy, and how do we do that? So one of the strategies which we have to look at very seriously is seek partnerships. This is collective action, and we need to shift to these healthier diets. The first is to tap the plant foods, and this includes not just fruits and vegetables, but a lot of indigenous plants which are still underutilized, nuts, pulses, legumes, and limit the intake of animal source foods. It has been pointed out that it's easier said than done. You've got to make these more available, accessible, and affordable. Because as pointed out that the food which is ultra processed is far more cheaper as compared to freshly sourced food. And we need to implement food-based dietary guidelines, and we need to also seek a social behavioral change by education. Nutrition literacy, food literacy, start that very early in life and incorporate it in the curriculums of the school education programs. information which is validated, invest in public health information, improve food production practices, as well as reduction of food loss and waste both. We need to cut it by half, then only the systems approach is going to be working. The second strategy is to reorient agricultural priorities to produce healthy foods. So we have to look at the Indian diaspora. It is agrarian-based economy, where the thrust has always been on the staples, the cash crops. The time has come to shift to dietary diversity, which is going to support the health of the individuals as well as the planet. Look at climate smart crops. We have just ended 2023 celebrating the International Year of Millets. So nutri-cereals, millets, pulses and legumes, oilseeds, underutilized indigenous crops, which we are gradually losing out on. So the indigenous knowledge systems have to come back to the center stage. And the age-old traditional Indian agricultural practices which we have kind of left behind, such as crop rotation, which fixes the nutrients, intercropping, which helps in soil nourishment, controlled lifestyle grazing, zero tilling, mulching, composting, biofertilizers. All of this has to come back. And we have to promote local, seasonally grown, regionally available foods, because they are good not only for the economy, but we are also concerned towards the carbon credits, the SDG goals, and this is going to promote and nurture the sustainable ecosystems. There is a need, a dire need for collaboration across the supply chain, capacity building, training of all the stakeholders across the value chain. This is one such example of how can we accomplish sustainable utilization of wild and neglected crops for food and nutrition security. It begins with exploration. I just learned very recently that we used to have 1 lakh variety of indigenously grown just rice. Out of that, 95% has perished, and now the exact number is only 5,600 rice varieties. So just not 1 or 2 here and there, we have to really go back, connect to the roots, start improvising, improving, cultivating, and see that what is commercially viable and start popularizing that. So one such thing would help you to not only make your soil more healthy, replenish the lost nutrients, but also help in pollination. So an example of the mustard, which is very popular in India, when it is rotated with wild rocket, we find that it is taken care of Fusarium oxyporum. So much such examples are there, which will help us not only to bring back those underutilized, nutrient-dense foods back to our plate, but also bring in what is called as the micronutrient sufficiency on our plates. A sustainable food systems approach, we have all learnt about today the One Health approach. And we also know that, the farm size of the Indian agricultural farmer is not more than 1.2 hectares. So how do we integrate all of that, So if you have, let's say, irrigation facility, you're harvesting water, or there's a pond which is used for irrigation, the same is going to serve us to kind of, for the livestock, as well as it is going to help us to recycle and have a circular economy. The waste of one is used to, let's say, feed. So the stubble which is left behind today, and is a huge cause of concern of farmers in Punjab and Haryana, the northern India, that can be used to graze the crops. Biocomposting can be done. The fuel which is generated can be used for cooking purposes, and that's how we would be able to have water conservation. We will have better utilization of time and also improve the post-harvest management practices. Last but not the least, it is the food environment. Strong scientific evidence is pointing out that this particular food environment, which is towards the ultra-processed foods or obesogenic diets, is actually promoting consumption of foods which are not really nourishing. So what do you do about it? We need to have a multi-stake engagement, beginning from the consumer, educating the children in school, having these food literacy, nutrition literacy programs where the curriculum comes to the center stage. So yes, learning science and maths and biology is very important, but investing in your health, how many of us know what is the correct food to eat? What is the regional diversity? Which are the foods which are going to do you good during a particular phase of life? Bring that on board. Environmental sciences is already compulsory in India, that we understand that how environment is so important to this. What is also important over here to engage with the community. Each individual has an important role to play, and the micro environments in which we are coexisting, schools, colleges, workplaces, hospitals, railway stations, workshops, etc., have a positive food environment where the healthy food options are readily accessible. So nudging them, asking for a social behavioral change, the regulator is looking into the regulation bit of it. Nutrition literacy also means reading labels carefully before you are consuming a particular food. I think all of this will go a very long way in bringing about what we are looking at, healthy, sustainable diets for all. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Iram. I learnt a lot through that presentation, and perhaps it provokes many thoughts as well. Your plate diagrams are so powerful that I think a couple of us were going, wow, this is really important. Simple images, but quite thought-provoking. So now to our audience, we have time for perhaps one or two questions, if there are any from the audience. I'm not sure if we have people online, but okay, I see a hand at the back there. Please do come to the microphone. Please introduce yourself and the organization you represent. And please may I request questions? Yep. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the very good presentation, Dr. Rao. Yes, I'm Neil I'm affiliated with the International Biochar Initiative based in New York as the advisory committee member of the Philippines. Now, one thing that I would love to hear from you would be the connection between land and dietary diversity and the connection of the microorganisms, which of course has been a very big topic, especially in the EU right now, is the loss of microbial biodiversity because of the loss of soil biodiversity. And so if we look now, before I left academia, I proposed the study of gut microbiome of indigenous people and comparing it with the gut microbiome of city people. And now we know the difference. So the question is, what are your thoughts on the impact of farming practices and the microbiome of healthy food and overall impact on the population? Thank you very much.
I think it should be on.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Very, very, it's an important question which I'm not sure I can answer in one sentence, but I do agree with this fact that the microbiome has changed of that a person who's dwelling in the urbanized setup vis-a-vis the rural setup. That clearly points out the dietary intake. Our food in the urban setting is very processed. It is devoid of fiber, micronutrients, and that is why when you talk about the gut microbiota, what does it need? It needs a healthy fiber, and everybody's aware of probiotics, the K factor, the bifidus microorganisms which are going to proliferate not just in your small intestines, but also the prebiotics which are food for them. So I think it's clear, and in India per se, when we have moved from we're trying to move, let's say, from the whole cereals to the nutri-cereals. So one of the mandate was that we encourage eating whole grains, particularly the seasonal variety of these millets or the nutri-cereals, which are very rich in the B complex, fiber, certain phytochemicals, which the scientists are still trying to understand what is working, and that is how I think the whole cycle goes. Nutrition replenishment of the soil, as you said. Once upon a time when biofertilizers were used, but today we are talking about integrated agricultural practices where intercropping, crop rotation, non-tilling, the foliage, all of that leaves its footprints, which will be then taken up. So let's say when you do crop rotation, one crop fixes the nitrogen, the other one fixes the carbon. The millets are supposed to be C4, so they are climate resilient, so all of that. So I think it's the whole systems approach. It's demand driven. I would come to the last part of it. The consumers have to ask for it. That is how the producer will give it. And it has to be commercially viable for the farmer. I think all of us agree with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Iram. May I now take the opportunity to invite our panelists to the stage? Perhaps I'll start with Mr. Shigeyuki Takeuchi, who is the Associate General Manager, Global Communications Department, Science Group of Ajinomoto. He joined Ajinomoto in 1991. Please, as I'm introducing you, you may come up and take a seat. He has experience in the food ingredients and animal nutrition business and was stationed in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, and Sao Paulo, Brazil. He now belongs to the Global Communications Department and supports Sustainability Development Department. He was involved in the UN Food System Summit consultations and also took part in the UN FSS +2 in Rome last year. Mr. Takeuchi is a graduate with the Bachelor of Economics degree from, I'll try to pronounce this correctly, Oyama Gakuen University in Tokyo. Thank you. Next, I'd like to invite Ms. Xiaowei Li. Very pleased to have her, country head from Afghanistan, who's traveled here especially for this food forum from the World Food Programme Kabul office. I'm reading here, Xiaowei, that you assumed your responsibilities as WFP rep and country director in January 2023. And prior to that, you were also deputy country director for Afghanistan office and also worked as South Sudan's head of programs for a period of deputy country director for operations. I found this part quite interesting, that your background is in law. So we'll look forward to hearing from your perspectives as well. So from private sector, from World Food Programme. I'd also next like to invite Ms. Sherry Attilano. She is the CEO of Agria and Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition trustee. I'm just trying to flip the page here. And thank you, Ms. Sherry, as well, for joining us. You're the founder and CEO of Agria, Agricultural Systems International, which is an agro-social enterprise that aims to help eradicate poverty for farming and fishing families in order to alleviate the effects of climate change and to establish food security in the Philippines. You previously worked as a consultant with the Department of Agrarian Reform in the Philippines and working with farmer cooperatives. This is really quite interesting to also know of your interest with smallholder farmers and the transfer of technologies and inclusive agribusiness. Thank you very much for joining us. And last but not least, I'd like to, I think that, Kazuko, anyone else that we have? That's it. Okay, thank you. We did have an earlier panelist who I believe cannot join us now. So I'm going to mix this up a little bit. So perhaps if I can ask the audience if we'll go to Q&A after a few minutes of each of our panelists, maybe giving 3 messages from their perspectives in terms of the context of what the presenters have shared in the first 2 presentations from Mr. Agarwal and also from Dr. Rao. I think if you have 2 or 3 reflection points just to set the scene from the perspectives you're bringing to this event, that would be very helpful, and then we can go to a Q&A. Maybe I'll start with Sherry and work this way. Yes? If that's okay?
Thank you very much, Yasmin, for a very good introduction. And good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, ADB organizer, for inviting us. This is my second panel today. So it's so nice to actually hear from Parwan because we sit on healthy diet during the food systems, first champion group. So my takeaway on that is it's so complicated and complex, but coming from the point in the Philippines, I shared this morning, right, on a company private sector level, we work with the largest catering in the Philippines. We produce 8.5 million meals a year, feeding, the BPO industries, the digital and global giants and multinational companies. However, the inspiration of doing that is actually going back to the farmers, which actually, the question of one of the members of the audience a while ago, Sir Neil, about how is it connected to the soil. My background, I'm an agriculturist and also economist, so I always like thinking of if we tweak how the farmers think without really affecting much the economics, their income, what should that be? So that's the inspiration we started the business, going to healthy diet, changing the plate on how we feed the consumer is also making sure that the farmers are also eating well, making sure that the farmers are the first consideration, that they're also eating their produce. Because most of the time in smallholding farming communities, they earn income. Once they earn income, they go to a small convenience store and buy extremely processed food, highly sugary and extremely processed food, instead of eating their own produce, right? So from that alone, we said if you want to change this system, that we work with smallholder farmers while changing the system of how we feed the workforce. What we did is to really study how farmers work. So I established a farm school in the Philippines in 2017, and it's one of the first farm school that is accredited by the government of the Philippines. We work a lot on training the farmers and changing their mindsets. It's really social behavioral change on how they think of planting different crops in one piece of land. As a while ago discussed, like if you have a hectare of land, you cannot just plant tomato because if pests will come, everything will be damaged, right? So we discussed if the farmer would survive in a Philippine setting and eat healthy, how many varieties that the farmer should plant, and how does it affect the economics? Because at the end of the day, as much as we talk about healthy diet, if it affects the economics of the farmers, it will not solve the issue. So what we did on a context, we decided to layer the income of farmers, so they have income in 30 days, harvest in 3 months, harvest in 6 months, crops that will be harvested in 10 months and 1 year. In that alone, it gives them healthy diet because that's the source of their food. It layers that in their income, they survive climate changes, and at the same time, they could cater to a larger market. On the hindsight, because we cater and produce 8.5 million meals a year with our partner Sodexo, it also changed the way these people think. So now, because they think that, okay, the farmers could produce the need that we have, we don't need to import most of this produce. We need to design and teach our chefs and bring our chefs to the farm. Because at the end of the day, if you want to change the diet of the people in restaurants or cafeteria or in the workplace, the chefs is your forefront. I'm a strong believer in that. So we keep bringing the chefs to the farms, and the chefs meeting the farmers, and the chefs designing the menu based on the farmers produce per season. What are the production from January to December, and how do we design that? So for us, the interface between the chef and the farmers really changed the healthy diets from the farmer side, who are the producers, as well as the consumers, and then the producers themselves. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shari. Thanks for your response and sharing that insight. I'd like to go to Shawi next. And Shawi, of course, you come from one of the most extreme situations around lack of nutrition, particularly with what we've observed in recent years in Afghanistan. So could you please share with us that each country has double burden of nutrition with different solutions, but where you're working and what you're leading is particularly challenging. What type of public-private partnerships exist, and how do they collaborate? And especially in these vulnerable conditions.
Great, thank you, and thank you for having me. I wanted to maybe start with a discussion or just to explain why this is important. I think Dr. Ehram spoke quite a bit about the importance of a healthy and sustainable diet. In the case of Afghanistan, where we're also looking at significant high levels of undernutrition, undernutrition is one of the underlying causes of under 5 mortality. And in Afghanistan, that affects 60 out of 1,000 live births. So that in and of itself is something, it's just immediate mortality that we're affecting. It of course also affects development, not only the physical development of a child as that child becomes an adult, but also mental development. So where we, in Asia Pacific, we really value the benefits of education and as a core factor in driving economic growth. But if a child is not able to have the learning capacity, then ultimately a country's development is affected. And in Afghanistan, 1/3 of children under 5 are stunted. So that ultimately affects their capacity to learn. It also affects the overall health and creates a burden on the health system. And this, of course, corresponds to stunting that can lead to diabetes, micronutrient deficiencies. And in a country in Afghanistan where there's a very, very nascent, non-existent medical system in many cases. And so that's also particularly important that people are healthy. Unfortunately, over the last few years, we've seen a significant rise in acute malnutrition in Afghanistan with a combination of factors, drought that's been prolonged and consecutive, the economic fallout, and of course, what that ultimately means is this year, nearly 3 million children under 5 and 1 million pregnant and breastfeeding women are estimated to suffer from acute malnutrition. And it's a generational issue. We all know that the health of a mother affects the health of a child. And so I think then coming back also to private-public partnerships, but very much along the lines of what Dr. Agarwal mentioned in terms of his framework. As he was presenting, I was thinking those are all really the same things that I would be talking about. And despite as challenging, as underdeveloped as a system as Afghanistan, so if I also put it back into that framework, it still very much applies. One, we need the very basics. So in many cases, families just can't afford at the moment, they don't have access to a healthy diet. And where there is insufficient food or water and sanitation facilities, children might seek acute malnutrition treatment. And here, WFP provides a ready-to-use kind of specialized food that's dense in nutrients. That is ultimately produced by the commercial sector, and we work with them to produce that. So WFP has done that across the world, ranging from Pakistan to Rwanda, and now we're also working with a producer that will hopefully produce in Afghanistan next year. Of course, that is when a child is already malnourished. What we ultimately want is to prevent malnutrition. And that, of course, requires an entire food systems approach. And that looks at tackling poor diets, both from a supply and a demand side. And from the supply side, of course, a food system that produces, processes, and supplies healthy food at an affordable price point is required. So, and this is where, in particular, the private sector plays an important part. I think there's already been quite a lot of talk about the role that the agricultural production plays in all this. And I think that looks a lot more at the systems, but both Dr. Agarwal and Sherry mentioned smallholder farmers. And it can start from at the family level as well. We work with families, and especially women, who are able to develop a backyard garden, for example, that's able to then feed their families, but they're also able to sell, and the surplus that they they sell, they're able to then buy healthier foods. There are parts of Afghanistan that I've been to where it may be more a nomadic lifestyle, so they have livestock. I've had communities tell me that until we introduced fruit trees and vegetables, they thought the green things growing out of the ground was only for cows and sheep. And so it's really changing an entire mindset, but helping them to change that mindset. It's also helping them, there was in the framework talk about reducing food loss and food waste. But one very basic thing is just having the cold storage facilities required. Otherwise, in a place that's remote in Afghanistan, where there is no refrigeration or there's no electricity, there are more natural methods that can be built for cold storage that allows people to then have fruits and vegetables beyond the harvest season. And of course, it also looks at connectivity and roads. There are many places that are not accessible by markets at the moment, not easily and not affordable. So they really, when we talk local, we're talking very, very local. And then also access to information. Dr. Agarwal mentioned kind of digital solutions. We work a lot with helping farmers to understand what's the right price point they should be getting, or how much should a local market be selling at. And related to this, WFP in Afghanistan has been working on digital inclusion. So part of our assistance includes digital kind of financial inclusion. And through that, we're also able to have better understanding on how people are spending, what they're buying. And that can then be tailored into more behavioral change and what we can do. The behavioral change, of course, is quite critical. The media is important to that. Dr. Aram also talked about schools. It's not just changing parents' understanding, but we can influence at the school level, including with school meals that WFP provides that already shapes the type of choices that a child may take. And then I would maybe just two other points. One on processing. There are some kind of easy wins. Fortification is one of them. So WFP works with millers in Afghanistan. We've been supporting 44 local millers that produces not only for the food that WFP supplies to our humanitarian response, but also to the broader local market. And so that is there's already legislation in place, but it's not really enforced, and there really isn't a market that helps them to enforce it. Similarly, we've been looking at iodization of salt, and we'll explore also for vegetable oil. So, and I think the last framework that I would refer to of Dr. Agarwal's presentation is around the kind of enabling regulation and legislation environment. That's quite critical, I think, in any country, and even in Afghanistan, where it may not necessarily be enforced, but at least there is some regulation around it. Thank you.
Thank you, Shawi. Thank you. It's a very comprehensive presentation, and definitely very sobering when we listen to the very extreme situation in a country like Afghanistan, as you've explained. Actually, I found the numbers quite shocking, with a third of children who are stunted. It's actually really shocking to think that's Asia. Maybe we'll move to now, actually it's an interesting panel lineup as well, from World Food Programme to Ajinomoto. And Mr. Takeuchi, if you could please share the effort as a food company in the food system and fostering global well-being through sustainable nutrition solutions. What's Ajinomoto's approach to driving nutrition and the sort of value addition that you bring?
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me. Actually, I have a presentation.
Oh yes, I was going to say, would you like to come here and present?
Okay,
yes,
so sorry,
definitely.
I didn't tell you.
Please go ahead. I'll take your mic and place it there on the table. The mic's there.
Okay, thank you once again. Yes, my name is Takeuchi of Ajinomoto Group from the Global Communications Department. I also support our work on sustainability. And yes, I'd like to talk about how the private sector can contribute to nutrition improvement and sustainability food systems by explaining some of the work that we do. Next, please. I would like to also touch on some of the key things that everyone has mentioned, Agarwal-san and Rao-san. Yeah, as mentioned, I've been part of our projects on the UN food systems. Through my participation, I felt, unfortunately, a lot of negativity and distrust against the private sector. Some corporations perhaps deserve the criticism for prioritizing profits and maybe not having enough respect towards sustainability. However, I think there needs to be more understanding that there are many companies out there and businesses out there making strong commitments on sustainabilities and entities wanting to have partnerships to achieve SDGs. We, as the Ajinomoto Group, promote better, healthy lives and reduce impacts on environment. Next, please. Yes, and we commit to achieving eat well, live well, and we pledge contribution to the well-being of human beings, the community, and our planet with AminoScience. AminoScience is our technology, our know-how, to solve issues with amino acids. Some people say that the 18th century was the century of the antibiotics, 19th the vitamins, and some people say that 20th century is the century of amino acids, and we think that's how important they are. Yes, and here I'd like to talk about nutrition improvement and touch upon the importance of food education from a younger age. Needless to say, teaching young students on the basics of food and nutrition is very important so that they'll be able to make decisions and better choices on the right food in order to eat healthier lives. Based on this thought, the Japanese government implements systems to educate students on the basics of food and food production, nutrition, and the importance of exercise. It is called shoku-iku, or food education. I felt the strong impact of shoku-iku on my son when he was in elementary school. I said to him, let's go out for burgers and fries. And to my surprise, he said no. He's a university student right now and occasionally enjoys such foods. But I really think that he really has been very conscious of eating healthier foods. Next, please. By using very assets gained in Japan, the Ajinomoto Group has supported Indonesia and Vietnam to improve nutritional intake. And they, as was mentioned during all sorts of presentations this week, they mentioned there's all sorts of issues, such as the double burden and the lack of know-how to prepare healthy school meals. So what we do is we support, we have partnerships with various stakeholders, and we support registered dietitians, provide free software for menu development, which is very helpful for the people who prepare the meals. And needless to say, amino acids play a very important role in realizing this. Next, please. Next, I'd like to talk about supporting sustainable food systems. This is the Ajinomoto Group's biocycle. We procure about 800 million tons of sugar per year to produce our seasonings produced through fermentation method. After extracting the amino acids from the fermentation broth, we sell the remaining broth as co-products, which are abundant in nutrients, very beneficial for the plants to grow. And this replaces chemical fertilizers, which helps reduce the CO2 emissions. I'm proud to say that our co-product conversion rate is close to 100%. Next, please. Now, for us to have a sustainable production, we really think it's important to have very strong partnerships with the farmers because they face a lot of challenges. We support them battling viral diseases. We provide free soil diagnosis and also basic education on cultivating agricultural products. And as a matter of fact, we also, knowing that the health or the well-being of the farmers is so important, we provide free information or presentations on nutrition and food as well. Next, please. As everyone knows, GHG emission from dairy cows is also a very big issue right now. But what we can do with amino acids is to coat them and to produce a rumen-protected amino acid so that we can economically reduce emissions and balance amino acids, which contributes to achieving sustainability goals. Next, please. This is the last slide. But amino acids can be used for agricultural use as well. Amino acids are in biostimulants, which improve nutrition efficiency, abiotic stress tolerance, and quality trait of the crop. This is just some of the examples we have, but I think the important thing about getting together and making a difference is about identifying what the issues are and working together as a team. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Takeuchi. I learned a lot just now. I had no idea on the uses of amino acids. Fascinating, especially with the livestock, because I do believe that that's one of the big, very important issues at the moment as well within ADB on how do we manage the GHG emissions from livestock. So we'll now move on to a Q&A session, and if there are any questions from our audience to any of our panelists, and of course Dr. Rao is here as well. Dr. Rao, I wonder if you would like to come to the podium with the microphone, and if there are any questions. And Mr. Agarwal, are you online?
Yes,
Very
I'm also
good.
online. Yes.
Oh, excellent. Thank you. Okay. So, audience, any questions for our panelists and speakers? Otherwise, I may just warm up. Okay. Maybe I will ask maybe each one of you could answer this question. So I think for all of us here, the question around nutrition without compromise is very important, and we're quite keen to understand what areas need to be improved to ensure nutrition without compromise. And maybe I'll start with Mr. Agarwal first, and then we'll come to our panelists who are in the room. So, Mr. Agarwal, could we hear from you about the improvements to ensure nutrition without compromise, and how we can ensure, I expect what we're looking at really is ensuring nutrition for all, but of course in a way that is availability, affordability as well.
Yeah, thank you, Yasmin. I think the most important, intervention in this space could be, creating demand for healthy and sustainable diets through a comprehensive food and nutrition program. Unfortunately, many countries around the world that is not given adequate attention, like Japan has done through its Shokikyu program. And that holds the key because if there's demand for nutritious food, then companies will produce it and there is better alignment. And the farmers will also produce what is demanded by the consumers.
Yes,
So I feel that a strong focus on food and nutrition education, starting with the schools, is the way forward.
thank you. Thank you. And you do touch upon the Japan model. Mr. Takuchi, you presented that, and very good response from your son as well. But maybe just on that, would you be able to share with us, and then I'll ask our other panelists, because I'd just like to thread this through from the schools and the nutrition program and awareness raising. How could you share a little bit more about the program in Japan, as in when was it introduced and what were the instruments that were used? Yes, just on the Japan program, so we can understand a little bit more from the Japan perspective. As Mr. Agarwal said, this is a very important feature of the nutrition context.
Yes, thank you. This concept of having to educate people, young people, and also older people, had been in Japan from a very long time ago. There was a law implemented in 2005 asking schools to conduct all sorts of education, but it's been there for a while. I mentioned it's about education of food, nutrition, and exercise, but also there's a lot more taking place. Students are taught, if they're possible, if it is possible, to grow rice or all sorts of agricultural products together, for them to be able to know how they are grown, what difficulties there are, what issues they face, and they would cook their own rice and consume it together with everyone. It's a very effective, fun way to learn about food and nutrition. Also, there are, for junior high and high school students, there are cooking competitions happening where people get more immersed about learning about food and nutrition. So it's a very effective way, and there have been a lot of students from overseas who come to learn so that they can implement their systems in their countries.
Thank you. So with that, perhaps Dr. Rao, you can share with us your excellent images, which, as I said, I think the image is very thought-provoking and powerful, the two different plates. So in the India context, how are those images of the two different plates, what is reality and what it should be, how is that trickling in through the education system or awareness raising more generally amongst communities to generate, I think as Mr. Agarwal said, if we can generate a demand, then those farmers, and I think Sherry, this ties up with what you're saying too, that it's really about creating a demand for these products, which at the moment, for many of us in the room, maybe some of these grains are a little bit more of a fancy food that even for many of us is sort of fashionable food items. So, Dr.
Right, thank you. So I think the first step there is that you bring in food literacy. And like Japan, we've also have this particular regulation for schools particularly. This was only implemented in 2020, where school canteens and cafeterias are not allowed to sell any unhealthy food. And we also have something called as Eat Right campuses. Eat Right movement is a huge movement which was initiated at the time of Mr. Agarwal as the former CEO of FSSAI. And it is still kind of going from strength to strength. There is a third-party audit. So all institutions, whether of higher learning or school, they at least have a concept of what is safe food. The traffic signal is being used as, those foods which fall in the green zone, the ones which fall in the orange or the amber zone, and the red foods. And all that which takes to kind of promote, the healthy food environments. Your question regarding the two stark differences in the plates. So we also have these social behavioral models where we are, celebrating and also talking about this. There are conversations, there are narratives which are being talked about. So everybody has become conscious of how much of carbohydrates they are taking. Protein deficiency, at least in the urban settings, they are aware of it. But I would certainly say that we have still a long way to go. And fruits and vegetables, particularly, one I think is also about affordability. It's easier said than done. If you go and look at the cost of the fruits and vegetables, milk, protein foods, it's pretty kind of, unaffordable for a humble person, particularly in the rural setups. But that is why then coming back to the, the education where we are involving students to grow their own food, because that creates a sensitivity and understanding of the agrarian distress. It's all the newspaper headlines, what the farmer goes through. But when you care, nurture, you don't want to waste. So big takeaway is that whatever the child is growing is consuming it completely. The focus is on vertical gardens and microgreens, because one complaint urban settings people have is we don't have land. So how can we also use that? It's gradually it's a long way which we have to go, but as we said that we have to start resonating this amongst like-minded people, and I'm sure it's not impossible, as Mr. Agarwal pointed out. It'll happen one day.
Well, thank you very much. So from there, Sherry, maybe my question to you is, and as we're listening, a lot is about generating that awareness, and you shared about how you're really convening that approach through introducing chefs. But my question was still on the other side of it, on the consumer side. So the chef may come and make a plan for the year, but how do we still get the consumer to have that interest in knowing what is a nutritious diet? Why is this an opportunity to eat healthy diet? And as you mentioned, and I think we've touched upon it here, is affordability, where we can always revert to a packet of not so nutritious food in any form, and I'm sure we're all guilty of that at times. I may have been last night, but how do we avoid, or how do we get that behavioral shift from our busy days where it's just easier to go home and put something in a microwave into this sort of going back to maybe the basics of nutrition?
Thank you so much for that question, Yasmin. How we work it with our kitchens, because we're into workforce nutrition, right? The reason why we bring the chefs to the farm is for the chefs to understand seasonality. Because when the food is cooked and designed per season, it definitely tastes good. You don't need so much seasoning because, if the mango is harvested now because it's a season of mango, it is the sweetest mango. If you serve it in November, it's not the sweetest mango anymore, right? So that's how we work it. So the chefs are educated because at the end of the day, there's a notion and a stigma. If it's healthy, it doesn't taste good.
Yeah.
Right? All this, some of this veggie meat, a lot of people are like having a stigma. Oh, I'm not going to buy it because it tastes like cardboard. The texture doesn't like a meat, right? So there's always this stigma. And we said like, if we put this on a plate and we are feeding 60,000 people daily, it's a loss in our business and we lost clients, right? So we said the only solution to do this is to educate our chefs, because at the end of the day, the chefs are the ones cooking in the kitchen and designing the taste of food. So what we did is we designed the food per quarter. So because every cropping season, that's a quarter in season in the Philippines. And then to educate that, I personally train the chef on seasonality of the crops. And then we bring the chefs to the farms to have an interface with our farmers for two reasons. One, for the chefs to be educated by the farmers on how they plant, how they harvest, and what are their season of harvest. And second one, for the chefs to study food loss and food waste. Because like, for example, there are production on the farm that, like, for example, the farmers are planting tomatoes, and there are, like, extremely ripe tomatoes. So most of the time, the kitchen will not accept it because during the supply chain, it gets, perish, right? So when the chefs would see this, oh, this is the right tomato that we want to cook in the kitchen because it takes only 1 minute to cook this,
Right.
while the semi-ripe tomato, it takes 3 minutes to cook this. So our electricity cost for sautéing a semi-ripe tomato that doesn't taste that good compared to ripe tomato is bad. So we address food loss. The chefs immediately said, why not the women will process this as a puree and then serve it in the kitchen as a puree, right? So another one is, because it needs to taste good, we go to our clients. So every quarter we submit the menu to our clients, and then the review, it's being reviewed by our nutritionists. Because we have clients like international schools, the parents also need to check if their children are eating the right thing. We have clients that they send crew to the cruise ships. So they demand us, our crew of 1,000 people under training should only be fed with healthy food that is 1,500 kilocalorie per day. So our chefs and nutritionists should design that. So, but at the same time, it needs to taste good. If it doesn't taste good, it will not create demand. So another one, it goes and it translated to the production side. We have this farming community in Mahayhay, Laguna. When we started working with them, we started with 60 hectares of land, 165 farming families. Now, in just a year, they now cultivated 300 hectares of land in a regenerative manner. Before, they were cultivating only 3 crops: tomatoes, cucumber, and sayote, very common in the Philippines. After 1 year, when we give them the PO, the purchase order, they said, oh, we can also grow radish, we can also grow bitter gourd, we can also grow, other crops. So they said, can we also fulfill some of these vegetables? So it increases the number of the vegetables they plant on their land. From monocropping, a lot of them are planting minimum 3. We call it, the American Indian model, the 3 sisters, right? That in 1 hectare, you need to have 3 different crops that could survive. So it translated, it's because the kitchen created this demand because the chefs designed the menu very, very good, very, very well. And then when the farmers would see the purchase orders, they want to plant more in variety and in biodiversity. So like, for example, in Mahayhay, Laguna, now they have 300 hectares of land. From 3 crops, they are now planting 16 different crops in just 1 year. And the increase of their income was around 120%, monthly. So this is a very, very good model because you have a model of tasting good by using your chefs and farmers interface. So the farmers plant also what the chef would release, because we know when we feed 60,000 people, 8.5 million meals a year, we know how many tonnage of eggplant we need, how many tonnage of tomatoes we need. And we plow it back to the farmers. And this gives farmers information that Pawan was sharing a while ago, and also our friend from Afghanistan. If the farmers have information, it gives them the right insight that, okay, if I borrow, and it also gives them financial access. Because the bank now will say, I can fund you because you have a sure market. And at the same time, the farmers are not afraid anymore because it's not a gamble for them.
Thank you so much, Sherry. Okay, I'm wondering if the audience has any questions. Yes, please. And then we'll go to Xiaowei after the question.
Good afternoon. I'm George Buid from Fashion Revolution Philippines. So I have a question. I like the presentation of Professor Roa about the ideal food and the reality. So my question is, do you think the order of food, the way we eat our food, is more there's a healthier effect than just eat them all at the same time? Like if you eat vegetables first, then need next proteins, then the rice and the other sweet stuff are the last one. So it's not, you don't mix them up, but you eat them in order. Is there like a healthier effect to a person?
No such national guidelines, but a little bit of research is there where it says that if you begin eating raw fruits and vegetables, meaning particularly salad and just sauteed vegetables, then your gut has got more amount of enzymes, which helps you to digest the food better. Even sipping warm water helps, and not eat, so maybe carbohydrates can be eaten whichever order you want, but if you go by that order, it works, but there are no standard guidelines that you have to follow that, conventionally speaking.
Thank you.
Yeah, may I?
Yes, please. Please just state your name and the organization.
Again, I'm Neil Ian from the IBI, based in New York. Our home office is in New York, but I'm representing the Philippines for the advisory committee. Now, what I was driving with my first question earlier was that the relationship of the gut microbiome with the brain axis and how it translates to student performance, and on the development agenda where we are trying to transition nations into better economies. So with all the women in the room and in the panel, so you would agree that you had good nutrition because of your parents. Our parents were more educated than their parents. So my question now is, how do we translate I also do on a voluntary basis teaching children during PTA meetings. I give free lectures to the school where my child goes to, and I see there's so much lack of information and awareness, especially with the teachers.
Sorry, excuse me,
Oh,
sir.
so sorry.
If you could just please place the question, given that we have some time constraints as well.
How would we make the program better and more targeted to make it effective? Yeah, thank you.
Is it to anyone in particular, the question? Anyone? Shall we?
So like I said, when you have hands-on experience given, and I would kind of complement what is happening in Japan, involve the children, and we've done this with, we had the Safe and Nutritious Food program, which we've implemented in various schools, particularly the government schools, where we play games with them. So some speakers spoke about in the morning a rainbow plate, if you recall. So the concept of rainbow plate is very difficult for even an adult to understand. So you would make a wheel, with all the rainbow colors, and then you rotate it like this, and they would stop, and then you ask them to name the fruits and vegetables, right? The next day, then you see the tiffin boxes having that change. So gradual, soft nudging, one at a time, and like he pointed out, it's just not food all the time. You've yourself said that there is a gut-brain axis. Proteins play a significant role. Not skipping breakfast, right? These are fun foods. Even if you want to have any processed food, it's not a complete ban, but you should know when to have it. Do not replace your meals with that. Physical activity. So it's a whole lot of things which are going to go in. Limiting screen time, right? Drinking water, avoiding sugary laced drinks, etc. But for a birthday party, you will not serve water. You will give them that. So I think it's an interplay and a mix of everything. And as we've said that the conversation has started, it'll slowly and gradually trickle down. And let's all resolve to take it to our places wherever we are engaged with the people and the children. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rao. I'll just request then Xiaowei as the last speaker. Maybe I'll just have one short question as well for Mr. Takeuchi. So Xiaowei, of course, we've been listening to the opportunities and options available. And as you said, I like that, Dr. Rao. It's not a ban. I like that. Sometimes it's okay. But Xiaowei, how about in the context of the sort of severe situation you're working in, where, for the audience, many of you may be aware that schooling in Afghanistan beyond a certain age is banned at the moment. So how, particularly with the girls who are, well, boys and girls, how is nutrition knowledge and awareness being brought in through your work with World Food Programme?
Sure. And yes, it's very unfortunate that secondary school at the moment is not accessible to girls in Afghanistan. But nutrition education can start very early on in primary school. And I remember when I was a kid, I learned about the 4 food groups when I was, I don't know, I think in 3rd grade. And related to, I think, what everybody has said, school is a very good platform for both the education, but also kind of grooming children to accept and get used to healthy diets. WFP has, in other places, worked with schools on kind of school gardens, but then also involving parents to be part of that. And that's parents either helping with the school gardens or parents learning from the same, how to grow gardens back home and being able to have some seeds to take back home. So there are different elements. And then in Afghanistan specifically, where girls are not able to go to secondary school, I think there's a lot of offshoots as to what are some alternatives. It's not across the board prevalent and available to every girl, but there are some vocational skills trainings that are accepted. It depends very much by location. And there are also some online platforms being set up. So I think the more that we incorporate into every possible avenue to help people change or learn what these other possibilities are, that's what we would be looking at.
Thank you, shall we? Just one then last question to Mr. Takeuchi, because I think it's important in terms of the range of panelists, and I'm very grateful to all of you that you bring such a wide range of expertise and different perspectives. So, Mr. Takeuchi, from our side, of course, we're always at ADB, the motto is we need to be doing more with the private sector. So just in terms of where we could build some of those bridges and avenues around the discussion of nutrition and the work that ADB does in terms of as a financier with government counterparts. Could you please, maybe 1 or 2 points on how we could try to build that stronger bridge with Ajinomoto? Of course, we're very fortunate to have Ms. Kazuko with us. But in terms of actually bringing across that private sector partnership, and you shared some of the approaches that exist, are there any ideas that you have on building or strengthening the bonds with the countries that we cover as well, based on the expertise you have?
Yes, this is something that I've been thinking about. This not only goes for nutrition, but many other things, many other issues which needs to be solved on a global basis. I think what's really important is to identify what the issues are, share that, and have people come on board to say, hey, I am an expert on that. We've had experience in solving such issues. Now, in order for us to realize that, I think there needs to be some sort of a platform where they gather all sorts of issues and people who can provide solutions so that the issues and solutions are put together. And needless to say, very strong leadership is required in order to be able to move things. There's a lot of very important, interesting, big movements around the world to achieve sustainability, SDG goals. I think more and more cooperation, mutual understanding needs to take place, and everybody to get together in a very efficient manner so that issues can be solved efficiently. We all know that there's not much time until 2030. I think that is one of the real important things to do in order to be able to solve those issues on time.
Thank you so much. And on that note, I believe we are on our time's up, and thank you, audience, for staying 6 minutes extra. But please give a round of applause to our panelists and presenters. And I'd also like to thank Ms. Kazuko and colleagues from Ajinomoto who have been here to help support the presentation and put this session together. Mr. Agarwal, thank you very much for joining online and staying throughout the session. It's been a pleasure listening to all of our panelists and the wide variety of experiences that you've brought. But the final point that you made resonates well with what everyone has said. It's a collective effort. And I congratulate all of you on this Food Security Forum, because by being here today, each one of you has demonstrated that there's enough critical mass here, even within the walls of this organization, and where we've hosted you, to try to bring about that change through each of the efforts that you make. So I'm very grateful to all of you, and thank you all for the learning today as well. Thank you.